In today's video, we're going to be looking at Closed Caption Converter CLI, or command line interface tools. In the last video, we looked at the web application for Closed Caption Converter, which is our GUI-based application for converting caption files. And we've also looked at the Closed Caption Converter API, which is a way of programmatically converting caption files where you pay per job or per conversion. Today, I want to dive a little deeper into the CLI tool, which is a really great option for on-premise deployments or offline deployments where you don't have access to the internet. We also have customers running Closed Caption Converter in serverless environments like AWS Lambda, which is pretty cool. So let's get started here. I have a folder with CC Converter in it, .exe. I also have a few caption files. So when you sign up for Closed Caption Converter and you receive a copy of our command line tools, you'll notice we offer for Windows, Mac, and Linux. I'm running a Windows system, and that's why I have the exe file here. I'm also running PowerShell. Now, if you're on Linux or Mac, you might be just running the terminal application, which is fine. They all run the same. The features are the same. There's no difference between them. So it's however you prefer to test and follow along. So I'm going to take our exe file here. I'm going to drop it into PowerShell. I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to feed me back the default help documentation. And the default help documentation is going to give you all the options that you would expect. So these are all the command line options. For example, how to get the version of Closed Caption Converter that you're running. And if I scroll down, you'll see the supported frame rates, supported extensions, and our supported profiles. Now, the difference between extensions and profiles. Profiles are kind of the closed caption formats that we support. Okay, because with closed captioning, it's a little bit different than video. So for example, we have multiple profiles that have an XML extension, right? And that's just the way it works. We have multiple profiles that use a .cap extension or a JSON extension. So that's the difference here. And we use the profiles to read and write caption files. Underneath that, we have some basic examples. So the first example here, you'll notice is a very basic example. It has a default source, which is an SRT file, and a target, which is an SCC file. So this would be converting a Subrip file to an SCC. And then we also have an advanced option here, which is using a preset file or a config file. Instead of passing in the source and the target, you would put those into a config instruction. So it'd just be a basic JSON that gets fed to Closed Caption Converter to tell it what to do. Underneath that, we have our link to our online documentation and a link to contact our support team if you need help. Today, I want to go through both the basic example and the advanced example to show you how to kind of get the most out of Closed Caption Converter. So I'll start by just clearing the screen here. And we'll run our first conversion job. And a basic conversion job is going to look like this. It's going to be converter.exe, and we'll pass in a source. So in this case, I'll pass in this SCC source here and a target. So I'll have a -- target. Again, I'll just take the same SCC file. I'll drop it in there and I'll just change the extension to, in this case, we'll just do SRT. And by default, Closed Caption Converter knows we're going to want, this is going to be a Scenerist file. So this is going to default to the profile, the Scenerist profile. And this is a Subrip file. So it's going to default using the Subrip profile to create the new file. So if I hit enter here and we look at our demo folder, you'll see that I now have an SRT file in this folder, right? So this SRT file starts at, it seems to start at 1 hour, right? And you can see all that here. And I can close this down and we'll just go back and we'll add a little bit more to this to make it a little bit more complicated so you can see how much you can do with this. So what happens if we wanted to do a frame rate conversion? Well, it's as easy as doing source frame rate 2997 and then -- target frame rate, right? And in this case, we can set the target frame rate to 25. And instead of SRT, why don't we do an STL file or an EBU-STL file? So again, STL, if it sees that extension, it's going to default to using EBU-STL as the default profile. So if I hit enter here, we now have a new STL file in my folder. If I open that up, you'll even see at the top here, it says STL25, which denotes that's a 25 frame STL. Awesome. If you're following along, these are pretty simple examples, pretty basic examples. in terms of what you can do with Closed Caption Converter. If I go back to the default help documentation here, all of the arguments that you see here are available in the options part. So you can see here we can do frame rate conversion, we can do auto formatting, right? We can do partial or segmentation. So if you just wanted to take the first, 5 minutes of a clip, right? Or the last 10 minutes of a clip, you can do that using a partial. But in order to access any of the advanced functionality in Closed Caption Converter, you need to start using what we call preset files. Okay, so preset files are going to look like this, where you basically can pass in a config JSON, which will have all of the instructions inside of it telling Closed Caption Converter what to do. Now, how do you know what these config JSONs are supposed to look like? That's a great question. So in order to know what the config files look like, we use Closed Caption Converter Web, which is our web application GUI. And this is how this all kind of ties together in the ecosystem, right? So we use Closed Caption Converter usually just to test conversions, but also generate these preset files. So if I come in here, I can run a convert job. I can choose my file. So for example, if I choose my SCC file, I can then convert this to a different format. So I can choose, for example, in this case, we'll do XML. I can say if we want, in this case, let's do Netflix captions, and we'll do that here. We'll run convert and we'll go over to our target. There we go. So you can see our output is here. And this is great. It's a good test in terms of seeing that our files convert properly. And then in terms of taking this and creating a preset from it, we're going to go over to the job description that gets generated. And this is going to be our preset JSON. So we're going to copy this. We're going to minimize the browser. We're going to come into our demo folder here, and we're going to create a new file. And we'll call this new file preset 01, and we'll change the extension on this to JSON. And Windows will warn me saying, the file might become unusable. That's fine. I'll hit yes. And I'm going to open this in Notepad and then paste in that JSON that we had. So you can see that here. Now, the only change I'm going to make here is I'm going to change the source and target. So I'm going to remove these two properties because I'm going to put these in the command line arguments as command line arguments. So that way you can kind of see it working and get an idea of how it works as a preset. So I'll remove the source and the target, and I will also remove the extensions because we don't really need these here because they'll already be specified on the source and the target. So that's fine. So if I do that and I resave my preset here, we're going to convert from Scenerist or SCC to Netflix captions. So I can minimize this again, come back to my terminal window, run this, and instead I will pass in the source, and I'll grab my SCC file again, and then I'll pass in my target, -- target, and I will copy this in, and I will change the extension this time to XML. And in order to use that preset, I'm also going to do -- config preset 01. And you'll see when I hit enter here, it's now going to create that XML file here with using the arguments in the preset file. So if I open this up in Notepad, you'll see now it's using, the Netflix style or the Netflix settings to generate my captions here. So you can see that here, and I can close this down. Now I can make other changes too. So I can say, source frame rate 29. I can say I want to convert this to 25, right? So again, we can do a frame rate conversion. I can set an offset. So if I wanted to set the offset to, let's say 10 hours in this case, I can do that here. And this is, instead of changing the command line arguments, you're just making changes to the JSON file here. So you can see that here. And then we'll change offset type to add. And again, you can do it here. Or you can even come back here and do it through, the advanced tools. So if I did the exact same thing here, I would change, the source frame rate. I'd leave that at 29 and 7. I would change the target frame rate to 25. I would turn on, right, the offset type and set this to 10 hours if I wanted to, and hit convert, right? And make sure that obviously works. So you can see here, it's now being offset by 10 hours. And that's going to generate the same job description for me here. So you can see if I scroll down here, I have my source, my target frame rate 25, and I have my time code offsets. So offset 10 hours, offset type add. So you can do it in here and then copy the preset JSON into a file. That's fine. or you can just edit the preset the way you want. So I'll do that here. And again, I'll come back to my terminal. I'll run the exact same job again. And this time I will come over to my folder. I will open up the XML and I should see the same thing as what I'm seeing in the web application. I should see the same thing. So there we go. So now you can see the offset. It begins, 10 hours after. So because it already started at 1 hour, it now starts at 11 hours. And if I go up to the top, you can see that the frame rate of the file is now 25 frames, which is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. Now, this is great. There's one thing I want to just point out here, and that's the job type. So when you run jobs in Closed Caption Converter, by default, they are convert jobs. That just seems, that's the default kind of setting that takes in. But that's not the only job type that we support. So for example, if I come back here, I'm going to close the job description window. If I come back here, I can change this job to a verified job or a QC job. I can close out my timing and sync. I can come to automatic QC. And great, so it's actually already enabled here, which is perfect. So I have enabled content QC. I can set up a QC job here that basically is going to tell me if there's any issues with a file, right? So in terms of saying, the minimum characters, because it's an SCC file, it should only ever have 32 characters. It should only be up to 2 lines of captions. The number of words, we can leave that. We can detect overlap, detect illegal characters. We can even have minimum duration in terms of, how long or how short an event can be up on the screen for, that type of stuff. Minimum frame gap, minimum and maximum CPS, right? So for example, I could say, I want to know if it goes above 20. And maybe I don't care about the words per minute. So I can set that to 999. Here, because it's a 1 hour file already, I can say, it has to start between 1 and we'll just say 2 hours, right? And I can verify this and it creates what's called a QC report. Right? And this is a way of basically, seeing, what the issues are. It'll tell me if there's any events that error out. So for example, under the content array here, you'll see that we have, a CPS or a reading rate error, characters per second. And it's saying the first event is on screen, for not long enough, right? Because normally a CPS maximum would be 20. Right? So you can see that here. And then we go on and on. So we have a start time error. The first event starts before the 1 hour, right? You can see that all here. So this is kind of a way of automating your caption or automating your QC process for captions. And again, I can come to the job description, copy this job description, go back to my demo folder here. I'm going to create a new preset in this case. So I'll do text document preset o2.json. Perfect. I will open this up in Notepad++ again, paste that in, and I'm going to make one quick change or 2 quick changes here. I'm basically just going to remove the source and target again because we don't need it, right? And the other thing I can do is I can remove the target profile because we don't really need the target profile, right? And I can remove the source and target extension and then hit save. And again, because we're not generating an output in this case, you can just leave all this stuff alone. This is totally fine. The part we really care about is the QC settings. So those are all kind of set here based on what I've set already. And if I hit save, which I've done, I can then come back to the terminal, run this again, and I'll do, instead of preset 1, I'll run preset 2, and I will remove the target from here because we don't need the target. And I will hit enter. And you'll notice in this case, instead of the XML file, I now have a new file called scc_report.json. And I can open that up in Notepad++, and you can see here all of the results from that QC, right? So you can see that there's a couple jobs. We have some reading rate errors here. So for example, event 2 has a characters per second value of 38. So it's on screen for just not enough time to read really. And you can see here, up to 24. So these are just really fast captions coming up and down on screen. So they might be a little tricky to read, and it might be something you want to look after. Just to summarize everything, we looked at the command line tools for Closed Caption Converter. We looked at a very basic example in terms of just passing in the source. If you remember this, the source and the target, and then we added in, the frame rate for frame rate conversion. And then we did a more advanced conversion where we basically did, the source along with a config file or a preset file. If you have any questions in terms of next steps or getting started, please feel free to reach out to our support team. We're happy to sit down on a call and build your preset files with you or help you through any troubleshooting if you're seeing any issues. That's why we're here. Please feel free to reach out. If you have any feature requests or any profiles you need added to the application, again, please reach out. We're always happy to add new profiles to Closed Caption Converter.